right, everyone, welcome to week 15 North America. This is our final region that we'll study, and it just comprises two countries, Canada and the United States. I've had a little technical difficulties this week, so I'm re-recording this. Um, but I'll get it all just in time for the semester to be over and it to be irrelevant for you all. Okay, so your last reading review questions were due this week. Almost all of you have turned in your current event. If you have one due this week or it's a little late, go ahead and get that in. There's 2 extra credit assignments on Blackboard. Go ahead and check those out. They're both due May 5th. And the other 2 big things that we have coming up are your final presentations due Thursday, April 30th. So those are due in about a week. And then we can, if you have questions about that, just let me know. Some of you guys have already turned yours in and they're looking really good. But just make sure there's 8 slides. There's a title slide that has the country and the topic. So food in Germany. A slide with a map of the region of your country with your country outlined or highlighted. And then in addition to these other slides, you need 5 separate slides that describe food in Germany, music in Jamaica, etc. And then a works cited section with your sources. So you can use Google Slides or PowerPoint or whatever, but something visual that's a presentation and due April 30th. There's an example online or on our Blackboard. There's also a Dropbox for you to turn it in there. Okay, and then the next big one is your final exam. I'll post it Tuesday, May 5th. It'll be due Friday, May 8th by 11 p.m. at night. It covers the regions that we've covered since our midterm, so North Africa and Southwest Asia, then Sub-Saharan Africa, then Oceania, Australia, Antarctica, then Latin America, and finally North America. And the study guide is also posted. All right, so let's get into it. So 2 countries, US and Canada, and both have some of the highest standards of living in the world. So that means they rank really high in terms of their level of development. So going back into the semester, some of the things like, what does it mean to be a developed country? So they have high life expectancies, access to healthcare, access to affordable education, good environmental standards. So the air they breathe, the water they drink is clean, transportation, things like that. They also share a colonial history, so that's the world's largest undefended border. And they're both really big. So Canada is the 2nd largest country in size, and US is the 3rd. And then, of course, they share physical features, mountains, the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, and on the Pacific side, they're both part of the Ring of Fire. So we've talked about the Ring of Fire several times, and now our final region that's on the Ring of Fire. All right, so this quote from the book really, I took an interest in because I didn't actually know it when I first started teaching this class. So a greater range of natural hazards than in any other country in the world marks the natural environments of North America. Woo. So think about what kind of natural hazards are we at risk for in this region? What about in the U.S. more broadly? Take a moment. Tornadoes in our region, the Midwest / Missouri, Kansas. Blizzards, floods, droughts, hailstorms. I mean, we have a lot. And then the U.S. more broadly, you can think about earthquakes, hurricanes, northeasterners, sandstorms, things like that. All right. So the United States has a lot of, we've had some significant earthquakes over the years. Oh, what happened to that map? Oh, there it is. Oh, hang on. This is why if I make it big, it will turn black. We don't want that to do it, so. No, I want paste. Why am I so... Great so far. Okay. So earthquakes. Here are all the spots in the United States that are earthquake hazards. You see especially the West Coast, but also some little maybe less well-known spots, such as in the Rocky Mountains here through Yellowstone Park. Woo! Missouri, right through here, our own little Boot Hill. Tennessee, South Carolina, and sorry it cuts off, but Alaska as well. And here's a video because one place in particular is supposed to have or geologists are thinking that it's, quote, overdue for a large earthquake, and that's the Pacific Northwest up here. So go ahead and take a moment and watch this video about the superquake that might hit the Pacific Northwest. But another kind of lesser known earthquake region is in the Missouri. So there's a New Madrid fault line here. And the New Madrid earthquake was the greatest earthquake ever recorded in North America. And it began all the way in December 16th, 1811, and went all the way for 2 months to February 7th, 1812. Hi, Tony. Oh, my God. Don't step on me. Oh, no. All right. There was 1,874 earthquakes felt as far as Louisville, Kentucky, 250 miles away. Tremors were also felt all the way out in Boston, Detroit, and New Orleans. It formed a lake, and very few people died because there weren't a lot of people living there. But if it happened today, the loss of life would be way more significant. All right. Other natural hazards that the United States has are volcanoes. So Hawaii is kind of like when we discussed Iceland. It's built on a mid-oceanic ridge. It's a geological hotspot. So the volcanoes have created the islands of Hawaii, and they're still active. So they're making Hawaii bigger and bigger every day. But if you go through the Cascadia Range along the west coast and then all the way down to California, there's another set of volcanic mountains. So here is Mount Rainier outside of Seattle. All the ones that are red are active, and all the ones that are beige are potentially active. So quite a few volcanoes right here in the continental U.S., and then quite a few in Alaska, and then in the same mountain range carries up into Canada, so Canada as well. One of the more well-known eruptions in somewhat recent history was Mount St. Helens in 1980. So this is right outside Portland, Oregon. It's in Washington State, though. And when it erupted, a little bit like Krakatoa in Indonesia, it completely blew off the side of the mountain itself, destroyed ancient forests, and also led to the loss of life of scientists that were studying it and some hikers. But it's active still, so that's right between Portland and Seattle. So again, the loss of life would be pretty significant today. And when a volcano erupts in the United States or anywhere, it's not so much the fear that you're gonna, be running from lava like in the movies. It's more about the ash fallout. So volcanic ash is very, very destructive. It can sorry, you're okay. So volcanic ash can kill crops, so it can lead to famine. It's really, really bad to breathe in. So the volcano, and it lowers the global temperatures or regional temperatures. So that's more of the concern than the actual lava. Even though, not to say, of course, don't run from lava if it's nearby. All right, so not in the same geographical area, further into the Rocky Mountains, here we have Yellowstone National Park. Some of you guys might have been there. It's in Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana. There's a video explaining it, but it's called a super volcano. So it's mainly under the ground, and it's what has led Yellowstone itself to be such a tourist hotspot and a geological wonder with Old Faithful and the various geysers, is because it kind of lands in this, this geological wonder. But as the YouTube video will show, scientists fear that if it erupts, it would be, quote, the end of life in North America as we know it. All right. Now let's talk about some cultural geography of the region. So, starting with the United States, just some basic cultural stats. So, stats about the people in the country, um, and its population. So, the U.S. is the third largest country in population and size. So, we're pretty big in terms of our size, and we have the world's third largest population behind. You got it, I'm sure. India and China. We're 80% urbanized, so we're about as urbanized as, say, many European countries, and we're on par with, Japan, South Korea, when we talked about many East Asian countries. In terms of our ethnic and racial statistics, we are 83% white in the United States, 12% African American, and that number really has not budged since the 1970s. It's not really shrank, and it hasn't really grown. 3% Asian, which is a number that is increasing, 1% Native American, and then 17% Hispanic Latino. And if you'll notice, those don't all add up. And that's because, as we sort of talked about last week, Latino can be any racial category. You can be Latino of African descent. You can be Latino of indigenous descent, or Latino of, German, European, kind of more white descent. Biggest trade partners, so China, Canada, Mexico, Japan, quite a few countries that are wealthy that can afford our more expensive products. And then we started out this semester talking about Europe and how, from about the 1400s to the 1900s, European politics, culture, and economics dominated the globe through colonialism. In World War I and World War II, these European empires, in particular the British and the French, they really started to decline. And after World War II, we had two superpowers that were left. The USSR, going kind of communist, very communist, and then the USA, representing capitalism. Now there's only really one superpower left after the fall of the USSR in the early 90s, and that's the United States. So now it's kind of the age of America, where we are the dominant force around the globe. So I want us to think about, how do we maintain the strength of our middle class, the strength of our economy, the strength of our standard of living in the 21st century. And then in terms of being a superpower, how do we, if you want to maintain our superpower status, how do we maintain that? Or do we even really want to do that? It doesn't matter. All right, but back to cultural geography first. So, some stats on our northern neighbor, Canada. About the same size as the United States in land size, but in terms of population, they are 1/10 the size of the United States. U.S. is about 337 million, I want to say, and Canada is only 37 million. So they have a lot fewer people and a lot of space. They have a very globalized and developed economy, a very high standard of living. They, instead of a president, they have a prime minister. Here he is. His name is Justin Trudeau. But it's still part of a monarchy. They're a monarchy. So Queen Elizabeth is their queen. She's on the money. So like Australia and New Zealand, in name at least, Queen Elizabeth is the leader. In the United States, we have 50 states and some overseas territories. In Canada, they have 10 provinces and 3 territories. And here's a map of Canada. Another difference is in terms of where people live another difference between the US and Canada is where people live within their countries. So if you look at population density of Canada, the vast majority of Canada is sparsely populated. Look, all this that's black is sparsely populated. The most populated regions have more than 50 people per kilometer. And almost all of those are located, all of the ones in red and orange are located near the U.S., almost all of them, near the U.S. border. So most Canadians live within 100 miles of the U.S. border. And a lot of that has to do with climate. So way up here is by the Arctic Circle. Much harder to live there than some of the more mild climates that you see over here in what would be their Pacific Southwest or their Southeast. Um, so really congregated toward the south in the country of Canada, compared to the United States, where we are we spread from sea to shining sea, from the east to the west. And this is a map where each of the peaks represent population centers, and it says population density is highest in New York City, where there's 22,000 people per square mile. So wow, that's a lot of people in a very little amount of space. Compare that to over here, Wyoming. It has the lowest population density of all states in the lower 48. So not including not including Alaska and Hawaii. So 5 people per square mile. All right. Here's Kansas City, St. Louis. But we really have population centers in the United States in the Northeast and Midwest, but then other places as well. So Florida, Texas, California, throughout the Midwest. So we're much more spread out, with a few exceptions like in these mountain states and then the Dakotas. Fertility rates. The US and Canada follow fertility trends with other developed high standard of living countries like in Europe, East Asia, and Australia and New Zealand. So our fertility rate is low. It's below replacement level. So again, replacement level is a little over 2 per people. So, 2 people make a baby, you need 2 people to replace them. In the United States, number of children born per woman right now is 1.8. In Canada, it's even lower at 1.6. Now, here is a graph of fertility rates across time, but I want you to look at what happens to fertility rates during economic crises. So we have the Great Depression here, the 1970s energy crisis, which caused gas prices to go crazy, and then the Great Recession in 2008 to 2011. It goes down. Why? Well, think about it. Children are expensive. We've talked about this several times. And then also, if you're not hopeful for the future, if you're not sure you're going to have a job, you're not going to have a kid. On the opposite end of things, after World War II, we were that awesome superpower. The economy was booming, and boom, ERS happened. We have the baby boom. Fertility rates go way up. And then think about why did fertility rates drop in the 1960s in the USA? A lot of that has to do with access to birth control and the women's movement. Women wanted more rights over their body. They wanted to go to work, and it's hard to have a career and have unlimited children. But since the 70s, it's been pretty low, and then we dropped below replacement level pretty recently. If you're interested in how this breaks down across time and across ethnic groups, go ahead and take a look at this. But generally, for each racial and ethnic group, from 1990 to 2010, the fertility rate has dropped. Life expectancy, another important marker of how well a country is doing, because it reflects things like access to affordable and good health care, access to safe places to live, be it safe in terms of war or violence, other forms of violence like crime, gangs, things like that. Infant health care, maternal health care, so making sure that mom is healthy when she's giving birth and when she's pregnant. So Canada's life expectancy, 81.2 years. And then the US is 78.7 years. So United States, we're not making kind of this top. And then there's differences between females and males. So in the United States, there's about a 5-year age difference where women's life expectancy is 80.4. And then men's is 75. So why do you think that is? There's several different reasons. One would be men are more likely to do things that endanger themselves. So drive without a seatbelt, do drugs, drink, smoke cigarettes, do dangerous things. They're less likely to go to the doctor. So, something that could have been a cough turns into something more serious, or was just a cough turns into something more serious. And then in other countries in particular, where there's a lot more jobs in mining, agriculture, things like that, they're in jobs that are more dangerous and more likely to cause death. All right. Okay, immigration. Canada and the United States are huge destination countries for immigrants. And think about why. Well, part of it is our nice, strong standard of living. So, about 25% of Americans are first or second generation immigrants. So, think we have first and second generation immigrants in our classroom. My parents were no, they weren't. Never mind. My grandparents were second generation immigrants from Scotland. And then in the United States, we often think of immigration coming mainly from Latin America, but for both the US and Canada, most immigrants are coming from Asia. And unauthorized and authorized immigrants from Mexico are declining. Okay, so hopefully that worked out. I'm going to pause there and we'll start back up in just 1 second, but I just want to make sure everything looks good before I continue. All right, see you in a second.